everybody, this is Don Brewer from Grand Funk Railroad.
Hey, are you here? I knew you were. Welcome to the Paul Leslie Hour, home of interviews with some of the great artists of our time. You know, Grand Funk Railroad is one of the most beloved rock bands in history. Formed in the 1970s, the band went on to become one of the most influential rock bands in American history. The American band is currently touring the nation. In this interview from our radio archives, Paul caught up with founding member and drummer Don Brewer for an exclusive interview. Don Brewer talked about Grand Funk Railroad's storied history and gave his opinions on the state of the current music business. Please remember to subscribe to Paul Leslie's YouTube channel. It helps us, and it helps the artists we interview. And with that, hey, I think it's time we hear this interview with Don Brewer of Grand Funk Railroad.
We're welcoming Don Brewer, one of the founders of the most influential rock bands in history, Grand Funk Railroad. So welcome to the program, Mr. Brewer.
Thanks, Paul.
First of all, since our show is based out of Atlanta, I was wondering if you could tell us about some of your memories of the 1969 Atlanta Pop Festival.
Oh, sure. I remember renting a trailer, borrowing a van, hiring a couple of guys that we really didn't know to be our crew. We were going down there as a favor. You know, somebody was doing us a favor by getting us on the show. Nobody had ever heard of Grand Funk Railroad before. We were a brand new band. We had been previously known in Michigan as the Pack. We just changed our name and started working on this power trio format, you know, and, you know, there weren't a lot of gigs around. And somebody said, hey, man, if you can get down here for this Atlanta Pop Festival, we'll put you on opening act, opening day. So, you know, we borrowed a van, rented a trailer, drove down, and wrecked our trailer on the way down. Our equipment was, you know, strewn all over Tennessee, and we picked it back up, got there, and they put us on opening act, opening day. We walked out on stage in front of, you know, 30, 40,000 people, and they said, Grand Funk Railroad, and nobody knew who we were. You know, it's like, yeah, so what? You know, and by the end of the show, they were giving us a standing ovation, and we came back the next day. They asked us back the next day, put us on at a better time slot. Again, we got a great reception, and then they asked us back again the third day, and it just kind of took off from there. I mean, we got a lot of huge word of mouth around the South about this new band, Grand Funk Railroad, and everything took off after that.
There have been so many bands and musicians that have said that Grand Funk Railroad was an influence of theirs. Was there any musician who said that the Grand Funk Railroad was an influence that you felt particularly honored by?
Well, you know, I mean, yeah, Prince, you know, I mean, has made reference, and, you know, Van Halen has made reference to it. The guys in KISS, you know, we've got Bruce Kulick, who played with KISS for 12 years, is playing with us now. And, you know, he always told us that Gene and Paul were big fans of Grand Funk. So, yeah, I mean, we were, you know, very honored that we were, you know, sort of the founding fathers, you know, of rock and roll. You know, I mean, we were in that batch of groups that came out, and people were really taking notice of what we were doing.
I'm a big fan of Bruce, both his work with KISS and his solo music, and I was just wondering, what drew you to Mr. Kulick?
Well, Bruce and I go back to the 80s when I was playing with Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band as a tour drummer, and Bruce was playing with Michael Bolton as his guitar player, and you know, I mean, we became friends back then, and you know, everybody in the band was really, you know, amazed at how good he was and how versatile he was. And when this position came open in Grand Funk, he was the first guy I contacted to see if he was available, and of course he was, and we, you know, immediately got him into the band. It's been great.
Grand Funk Railroad has played in so many places, and some of the crowds have just been amazing, as you mentioned. I was wondering if there was any place in the world that you've played that you especially enjoyed.
Well, I always enjoyed going to Japan. It's kind of a culture thing, and they love American bands, and they particularly have, you know, loved Grand Funk, especially in the 70s. That was always fun to go there. It was interesting to go to Europe and into South America as well, but I think, you know, Japan was more of a standout for sure for me.
When you were growing up, what drummers were an influence to you?
Oh, you know, I got to say Louis Bellson was a big influence, you know. And then as we got into the rock stuff, you know, the guy Dino Danelli from the Rascals was a big influence on me. Also, Bernard Purdy, as far as the R&B stuff goes, Mitch Mitchell from Hendrix and Ginger Baker from Cream, they were all big influences on me.
So what music do you listen to now?
I listen to talk radio.
That's a good answer. So when you're not doing music, what kind of things do you do with your spare time?
Well, I'm kind of the appointed manager and road manager for Grand Funk, so that's what takes most of my time. When I'm home, my wife and I, spend a lot of time around the house. We do stuff together, and we'll cook or whatever it is that that we can spend time together. And I've got a family. My daughter just got married. She's going to start having kids pretty soon, so we're looking forward to that. So it's really a typical kind of a family home life.
I was reading about Grand Funk hooking up with Frank Zappa in 1976, and I was wondering what that was like.
Well, we were looking, once again, we had gone through a couple of producers. Terry Knight was our manager producer for the first 6 albums, and then we hooked up with Todd Rundgren, for We're an American Band and Shining On. That kind of, took us in another direction that was radio. We were kind of following what radio was doing, going from FM underground to being a hit format. And we were going, hit records and stuff. We tried a couple other producers, and we, before we got Todd involved, Frank Zappa's name had come up. So when we were looking for a producer again, we said, well, let's see what Frank is doing and see if he'd be interested in working with Grand Funk. We knew he had mentioned us, kind of tongue in cheek in one of his movies, and so we weren't sure if he was a pro Grand Funk guy or whatever, but we got him to come out to Michigan, and we really hit it off well. And it was very interesting to work with him. He's not the crazed musician, or he wasn't the crazed musician everybody thought he was. He was very, very down to earth, very humble guy, and great guitar player. He had a lot of great ideas in the studio. I loved working with him.
In addition to the tour coming up with Grand Funk Railroad, is there anything on the horizon?
Well, we just focus on doing live shows. That's really kind of where the business has gone for us. The record business has totally changed from what it was, when we came up. I'm not exactly sure, how people, get things on the air anymore as far as new bands. And we've been categorized as a classic rock band. So of course, classic rock only plays classic stuff by us. They won't play anything new. And, so we really focus on just being a live act. And, that's really what we love.
Out of all the Grand Funk records out there, is there any in particular that is a favorite of yours?
Well, I always liked E Pluribus Funk was one of my favorite albums, and Closer to Home was another one. American Band was another one of my favorites. I kind of look back and I remember what it took to make the records, and the ones that were easier, that flowed the best, that we didn't, we weren't on take 62. They were the best ones, and I think they stand the test of time too.
I'm sure you feel close to your band members, but I was just wondering, is there anyone in the current lineup that you feel especially close to?
Oh, I think all of the guys, and I'm especially close to Mel because we go back so far. He's my partner and my bud. In
the Cameron Crowe movie, Almost Famous, there's a quote, and it's too bad you missed out on rock and roll. And I was reading an interview that you did, and you were talking about how, Rolling Stone had been unkind, but really, the test is the audience. What do the music fans think about a rock band? And so what I was wondering was, do you think that when all these classic rock bands from the 60s and the 70s retire, do you think rock and roll is going to die?
Well, it already has, died in a sense of what we remember it being. It's completely changed. The recording business has changed. People don't, bands don't go into a studio anymore and just record as a band. It's some guy in his bedroom or some guy in a studio by himself, and he can record everything by himself. He doesn't need a band. So I don't hear a lot of, bands recording together. Like, a lot of the times we used to play live in the studio. That's how it went down on the record. There weren't a lot of overdubs. We spent very little time overdubbing. It seems that the industry changed from being what I considered, real rock and roll bands making rock and roll to more of a business. And, they broke everything down into little pieces, where bands ultimately started recording just the drums first. Then they put the bass on. Then they put the guitar on. Then they do about 1 million overdubs. Then they do the vocals. Then they, and by the time it's done, it's this it's a process recording of a song that started out being, one thing and ended up being something else. So rock and roll as we know it, or we knew it, where bands go out there and play with random abandon, seems to have gone by the wayside.
So what's the best thing about getting to be Don Brewer?
The best thing about getting to be, I don't know. I mean, it's got its ups and downs like anybody and anything else, so I wouldn't really say that there's any one thing. I love being alive. I love having a family. I love being able to continue to do what I did when I was a kid. I still feel like a kid when I'm on stage. So I would say if you had to say what's the best thing, it would be the fact that I'm still on stage. I'm still entertaining people. I still get a rush from it.
I have one last question, and given that this program goes out all over the world, thanks to modern technology, my last question is, what would you, Don Brewer, like to say to the world?
What would I like to say to the world? Let me see. I hate to get political, so the first thing that comes to my mind is politics, so I won't go there. I guess, I would like to say that, we need music. We need musicians. We need live rock.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Well, I do thank you for your time, Mr. Brewer. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, and I look forward to the show on Friday.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
See ya.
We thank you and appreciate you dropping in for the Paul Leslie Hour today. You can help the Paul Leslie Hour in our mission to provide independent media content like this by visiting www.thepaulleslie.com/support. We truly thank you. This is your announcer speaking. Performance of The Entertainer intro song and Corina outro song, courtesy of John Primorano. Well, that's it for today. So until next time, be safe and be good.